Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting of Monday, December 4, 2023 to order. I guess we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance later. City Manager, is anyone signed in for public comment this evening?
Do we want to do a roll call before we get to that?
Oh, you want to actually start the meeting? I forgot we don't have a clerk. Are you going to?
I am in place of
very
the
good.
city
Thank
clerk.
you.
She'll be here later.
Did we forget that?
Alderman Hill?
Here.
Alderman Chanko?
Here.
Alderman Jensen?
Here.
Alderman Bram?
Here.
Alderman Cahill? Absent. Alderman Toledo?
Here.
Alderman Park?
Here.
Alderman Nudera?
Here.
Alderman Bastido?
Here.
Alderman Nardini?
Here.
Alderman Brennan?
Here.
Alderman Irby?
Here.
Alderman Deuter?
Here.
Alderman Varimus? Absent. 12 present, 2 absent, Mayor.
12 present, 2 absent. We do have a quorum. And thank you, City Manager. Did anyone sign in for public comment?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Or is there anyone in the audience that wants to make public comment but did not have the opportunity to sign in? If so, please indicate. Seeing no one, we'll move on to business before the committee, which is the continued review of the fiscal year 2024 budget. We are on circle backs. I'm going to proceed in advance of item 7 where we last off and revert back to item 7 after we go through the remaining items to see how it plays out. So we're on item 8 on the circle backs. May I turn that over to you? Do you have any opening comments, City Manager, before we get started?
We have nothing to add just yet, so happy to answer questions about the circle back items.
All right. So we'll go to item 8. It was requesting a list of projects included in line number 1106061-570140, asking for the prioritization of these projects, and a list has been provided. This was a circle back by Alderman Hill. Do you have any further questions or need for information, Alderman Hill?
Thank you, Mayor. No, this is just asking what the items were that were accidentally copied and pasted for the gas post pounder. So
Very
thank
good.
you for that.
Is there anyone else that has additional information needed for item 8? We move on to item 9. This is a request for more details on the First Street landscaping project, including why is it priority D and why is it programmed over 4 years. This was a request by multiple aldermen, Bastido, Brennan, and Bram. Alderman Bastido, do you have anything further that you require on this?
No, but for clarification, I think my question was, why was it in if it was a priority D? I think I have gotten clarification on that. Obviously, it just comes up. We have a lot of tough decisions to make with the budget. There's a lot of items that are priority A that maybe I didn't see in there, but I think I'm figuring out the process of how things get in, and I learned the history of this item, and so no further questions.
Thank you. I think it was a good inquiry. Alderman Brennan, do you have any additional questions on this?
No, I'm good with the budget as is.
All right. Alderman Bram, do you have any additional questions on item 9, circle back?
No further questions.
All right. Does any other alderman have a question or anything further on item 9? We will then move on to item 10. This was a request for a breakdown of the vehicles included in 2023 and 2024 cab, I believe. That was Alderman Irby. Alderman Irby, do you require additional information?
No, I do not. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Anyone else have any additional concerns with respect to circle back 10? All right. Item 11 on the circle back list was a list of sidewalks as a circle back, but no additional information was requested. Alderman Bram, did you have something else that you want to bring up, or have you had an opportunity to discuss with staff or whomever?
Yes, I had an opportunity to discuss with staff offline. I have no further questions. I just wanted to verify that the current streets or sidewalks that have been approved by City Council are in the budget. I did that, as well as what is our next step if our policy changes in the future.
Very good. Circle back 12 requested information of what is included in the bike pedestrian plan improvements, and specifically how much is budgeted for crosswalk improvements. Alderman Brennan, this was your circle back. Does the information provided by staff suffice, or do you have additional concerns?
I appreciate the visibility, and I'm good.
Very good. Anyone else on the dais have any questions regarding circle back 12? All right, circle back 13 was a request for a detailed estimate of the 2 sidewalk projects being considered. This was a circle back by Alderman Bastido. Alderman Bastido, is this information sufficient, or do you have additional questions or concerns?
I just want to confirm with staff. So we have 2 streets that are currently going through the process for the cost share. And so they followed the process that we have in place, and they've gotten a sufficient number of petitions. And so I think what I'm seeing on this circle back is that the total cost is going to be around $300,000 if they were successful. So there's a sharing program in place, but do I understand we have $50,000 that is budgeted for this item?
50,000 for each, correct? 50,000 for each project right now.
Oh, it's for each?
Yeah. In the sidewalk line together. And what we've seen in previous petitions like this is the timeline that it takes would give us that idea in 2024, and then we would budget, if they're approved, we would budget for the full construction in 2025.
Okay, but there's 50,000 in each? Okay,
Correct.
great, thank you.
Does anyone else have a question on circle back 13? All right, circle back 14 is a request for an analysis of cost savings achieved by completing more sanitary sewer lining to reduce I&I inflow as compared to the cost of treating I&I. That's Alderman Bram. Alderman Bram, do you have additional questions on circle back 14?
No additional questions. As I spoke to during our concrete street resurfacing discussion, I was looking for ways to increase our funding for sanitary lining, but knowing what I know now with our additional capital needs for the wastewater treatment plant and everything else coming down the line, even though I would love to see more sanitary lining in this upcoming fiscal year, I just don't see how it's possible with all the capital improvement projects we have scheduled already.
All right, thank you, Alderman Bram. Anyone else have a question or issue on circle back 14? Circle back 15.
Mayor, excuse me, before you get there, can I just back up to
Certainly.
circle back 13? I misspoke. It's 50,000 for both of them, not each.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
I thought that was too good to be true.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor.
Circle back 15 was a request for fire vehicle cab sheets from 2018 to 2023 to see perspective on how the cab has changed over time, and there was an attachment. Yes. That's Alderman Brennan. Alderman Brennan.
Looks great.
Good.
Thank you.
Anyone else on circle back 15? Circle back 16, wireless alarms. What is the cost of the Johnson Controls contract? That was a request for information by Alderman Irby. Has the information that's been provided, is it sufficient?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I had a conversation with the city manager, and no further questions are needed this time. We're clear.
All right,
Thank you.
very good. Anyone else on circle back 16? Circle back 17, the question, what is a modest alternative to adding the camera network / real-time crime center? What can be added? Alderman Brennan, this was yours. Did you receive sufficient information to address your concern?
Yeah, it's really more of how do we combat some of the crime that we see in the city. And unfortunately, the grant that we've currently secured is not as big as I think Chief had hoped and everyone else had hoped. So I'm sure that's not we're not at the end of the line there. So I would encourage staff to continue to look for grant funding for this. That said, to Alderman Bram's point with capital projects and dollars being spent elsewhere, I think we have a good start with what we have from the grant, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Very good. Anyone else with questions or concerns on Circle Back 17? All right. You've put in the, Alderman Bramus has joined us. You'll add her in. All right. That takes us back now to where we left off last Committee of the Whole meeting on Circle Back 7. We spent a lot of time talking about it the last meeting, and I've spent a lot of time working with staff, and they have spent a lot of time looking at it. I believe we have a presentation to sort of tee off this, or re-tee off this topic. City Manager, may I turn it back to you?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, at the last meeting, we had a number of questions and points raised regarding the budgets for both concrete streets and for our other paving projects. And so we got together with staff to talk this through, and City Engineer Johnson has a presentation, a short presentation on information that was included on board docs. There was a lot of information, we understand that, but we went back as far as taking a look, well, went way back, but we looked at that 2005 study that Alderman Bram had raised. We looked at as far back as the original paving of streets in the Northeast area, which date back to 1968 and 69. And so we do have some information to present, and then are happy to answer questions after that.
Very good.
Thank you, City Manager Grabowski. This evening, I will present additional information on Circle Back number 7 related to budget questions about residential concrete streets. This presentation will highlight the information that was posted on board docs for the Circle Back. And the attachment was 149 pages, so my hope tonight is I can abbreviate some of this information and help the council understand. Tonight, I will begin by providing information and a brief history of streets in Elmhurst, and specifically as it relates to residential concrete streets. First, I will discuss the 2005 city staff-initiated study that determined the best long-term maintenance of residential concrete streets in Northeast Elmhurst. Second, I will discuss the 2014 residential concrete street plan that was adopted for resurfacing all residential concrete streets throughout the city. Third, I will briefly go over the 2021 draft pavement management plan for all streets, again, both asphalt and concrete. Fourth, I will discuss annual budget versus expenditures for asphalt and concrete roads over the last 10 years. And finally, I will explain the mileage and location of residential concrete street resurfacing over the last 10 years. So a brief history of Elmhurst streets. Overall, the city of Elmhurst maintains nearly 150 centerline miles of roadway, which includes all roadway types. About 123 miles, or 84%, are asphalt. About 23 miles, or 16%, are concrete, or concrete that has been overlaid with asphalt. This includes both residential and commercial. Of those 23 miles, it should be noted that 16 are concrete and 7 are concrete that has been overlaid. Major roadways like Robert Palmer Drive or St. Charles Road are examples of streets that have a composite pavement made up of a concrete base with an asphalt riding surface. Residential concrete streets are one of the types of roads within the city, and they date back to the 40s through 1980s. Of note, the vast majority of remaining residential concrete streets are in Northwest and Northeast Elmhurst. So let's get into the 2005 Northeast Elmhurst evaluation. This was a study initiated by staff with the help of Civil Tech, a professional engineering consultant, to help evaluate the existing concrete pavement in Northeast Elmhurst. What I learned after the Circle Back meeting last week is that this study was initiated by staff, as I said. The thought was that these residential concrete streets had been out there for a while, and staff was looking for some professional advice on what is the long-term maintenance and rehab of those roadways. So Civil Tech used pavement cores and visual observations to produce a scoring for various streets in that area. Through the analysis, the average street was thought to be about halfway through its life cycle. The evaluation also recommended long-term rehabilitation, which was the grinding and asphalt overlay of those streets in the future when needed. This was found to be the most economical and practical rehab for those streets at that time. So then we jump forward a little bit to 2014. There were some city council referrals asking staff to look at concrete streets. So we started a plan, and the plan contemplated a mill and asphalt overlay for all the residential concrete streets that were throughout the city. So city staff prioritized the remaining residential concrete streets across the city, again from north to south and east to west, and an initial budget of $450,000 was requested to start in 2015. The overall goal at that time of that study was 12 years to complete the plan. If we skip forward a few more years, I'm sorry, it was not keeping along with the PowerPoint slides there. If we skip forward a few more years to 2021, the city initiated a draft pavement management plan. When we embarked on this, this was a first of its kind for the city of Elmhurst, and this type of pavement analysis using data was getting more and more common throughout Chicagoland and the U.S. The plan was aimed at evaluating all city streets to provide a rating for each segment. The rating is known as a Pavement Condition Index, or PCI, and it has a range from 0 to 100, and 100 would be a brand new roadway. The city solicited qualifications and interviewed 2 firms. Ultimately, Chastain & Associates was selected for the study. In 2019, the contract was signed, and the data collection using a vehicle like you see here on the left side of your screen was completed late in the year. And that vehicle drove every single road segment throughout the entire city. Because of budget uncertainty heading out of COVID, it was decided to table this study until another drive or pass through with this vehicle could be done, and a second set of data could be used as a data point for city staff to evaluate the streets. Currently in the FY24 budget, there are proposed dollars for that second drive of the entire city. If we look at the 2021 draft pavement management plan results, that plan provided ratings for all streets and grouped them into good, fair, and poor. As shown on this slide, the good was green, the fair was yellow, and the poor was red. Of note, the study results were that the 2 largest areas of the existing residential concrete streets were generally rated as fair or good, and those are in northeast and northwest Elmhurst. So again, those are the largest groupings of residential concrete streets, again rated fair or good. For more information on these ratings, please refer to page 78 in your PDF for the Circle Back memo, December 1st, dated. If you would like to know, the green was a rating from 71 to 100, yellow was 41 to 70, and red was 0 to 40. Again, 100 being a brand new road. So I'll briefly go through the budget history over the last 10 years for both residential asphalt roads and concrete roads, and then I will review the budget versus actual. So the table before you shows a 10-year history of budget versus expenditures for both, again, asphalt and residential concrete streets. In 2014, and prior to that, the city regularly budgeted $300,000 for maintenance of all concrete streets, both residential and commercial. As mentioned prior, the city adopted a residential concrete street resurfacing plan in 2015 at $450,000 per year. Reasons for the increased funding in 26 for the residential concrete street resurfacing included rising costs and the addition of Crestview and Van Auken into the plan. Those were priorly FAU or federal aid urban streets that were eligible for grant funding. The city applied for grants 2 years in a row on those streets and did not score very well. And IDOT contacted us and rescinded their FAU status because of the low volume on those streets. So we did had to...
Ken, just to make it clear, it didn't score well enough to qualify for that FAU designation.
They did have FAU designation, but when we put them up against other residential streets across DuPage County through DMMC for grant funding, they scored extremely low, and that's mainly because of their low ADT or average daily traffic.
All right, thank you.
And sorry to interrupt you. Is this slide somewhere in the PDF?
It is.
Just because it's a little hard.
Yes,
to
it
read.
is.
It is.
Yes.
I'm looking, I'm on, can you direct
Page
me?
143.
Thank you.
Just a note for that. As Ken stated, the plan that was in place for a 12-year plan did not necessarily include, per se, Van Auken and Crestview because it was slated for these grants that didn't come through because the FAU designation fell through. So that extended, in theory, the plan from a 12-year plan to an additional year or two. And Kent is, for the record, Kent is not that you're testifying, but he's nodding his head yes. So it went from immediately, or pretty close immediately when the plan was kicked off, it went from a 12-year plan to a 13 or 14-year plan. Just want to make sure that's noted.
So if you look at the screen again, 2014 and prior, the purple box, we started at 300,000. That wasn't meant for resurfacing concrete residential streets. That was just maintaining them. So that could be patching, that could be a recon of a small section. It was more of a maintenance type budget amount. And then when the city adopted in 2015, the new plan, the budget was 450,000, denoted by the red box. Again, in 2016, we increased that amount to 540. That was because of rising costs and the addition of Crestview and Van Auken as stated. And we held that constant till 2022. In 2020, during the COVID pandemic, and then again in 23, there were planned deferments. Specifically in 2020, that was no paving across the whole city, both asphalt and concrete streets, again, because of the uncertainty with revenues at that time. 2023 was a budget discussion to defer concrete road resurfacing for the years 23 and 24 due to fiscal constraints. So I just wanted to point that out.
Mr. Mayor, just for a procedural, could we ask questions throughout the presentation, or what is the preference?
How long is I think maybe, why don't we go through the presentation and then we'll go back and ask questions. So keep notes and then we'll,
Okay.
and where it shows up in the presentation. All right, go ahead.
Just a couple more slides, I promise. So if we look at the annual residential concrete street resurfacing over the last decade, we have paved about 8 miles over that time period. That equates to just under 1 mile per year. It shall be noted again that there was no paving, both asphalt or concrete, in 2020, and there was also no concrete resurfacing, as I stated in the last slide, in 2023 by planned deferment. Lastly, approximately 60% of concrete residential resurfacing took place in Northeast Elmhurst, and that was a total of 4.76 miles out of 8 over the last decade across the whole city. So again, that's where we have the most concrete streets. Diving into Northeast Elmhurst, my last slide tonight focuses on Northeast Elmhurst and highlights the residential concrete street resurfacing, again, over the last decade. Excuse me. Of note, all west to east streets have now been overlaid. These streets generally carry more traffic, and that's why they were prioritized over north-south. The north to south streets are the next focus, although some of them have already been done, such as Van Auken. Roughly 50% of all streets in this area have been resurfaced over the last decade. Please note this exhibit is the last page, which is page 149 in your circle back PDF. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'll entertain any questions.
Mr. Mayor, before we get to questions, if I could just say, we asked a few extra staff people to come tonight, and for those who don't know, I think most everybody knows Corey Taberry, our Assistant Public Works Director, but next to her is Kim McGrew, who is our street superintendent, and Kim was an integral part of the 2014 plan that we put together. So they're here to help us with information as well.
All right, very good. Alderman Brand, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on the budget history, Kent, you did note that in 2014 it was for the concrete street resurfacing, that was more maintenance than any resurfacing, correct? I think I heard that correctly. I just want to make sure I'm clear on what the data shows here. For streets, roadway improvements, and for concrete as well as asphalt, is that just resurfacing? I know it says resurfacing, but above it says roadway improvements, and you already noted 1 year that was just maintenance and not resurfacing. So is each of these dollar amounts just resurfacing and maintenance, like patching, asphalt and concrete patching, or what are these dollar amounts reflective of?
These are just resurfacing. Separate dollar amounts per year were allotted for patching and other maintenance activities.
Except for that 2014 year where you said it was maintenance?
So the 2004 year, as I understand it, and again, I might,
Oh,
2014, the 300,000, is that what you're asking, Alderman?
Yeah.
So when I look back at the budget books, that 300,000 was in there for many years, stagnant at 300,000. What I believe, and I might turn behind me to see if I can get some nodding, is that that was meant for a catch-all for concrete maintenance. Excuse me, Corey corrected me, it was mostly used for resurfacing at that time, but there was no long-term plan to go throughout the entire residential concrete street network.
Correct, okay. Another question on this page, I noted in previous discussions about the concrete street resurfacing budget item about what I'll call side projects, right? I know that I've had conversations with Stan about that. In this budget, we have additional asphalt resurfacing that's not included in that big bucket, so are these numbers reflective of just the line item that says asphalt resurfacing, or does that include, like proposed in 2024, I want to say it was like Villa, the other small projects, Alma, Villa, Cayuga, Northwest Elmhurst, et cetera. So what does that line item really mean? Just the general bucket or the bucket with the side projects?
This line item that you're referring to, the asphalt street resurfacing, is meant for throughout the city residential resurfacing. There are other capital projects such as Alma and Northwest Elmhurst that is in the upcoming years that is meant for reconstructions. We've done a few other reconstructions on Crescent and Van Buren in the last couple of years, and those were always budgeted separately as separate KEBs. So this is just our annual residential resurfacing throughout the entire city.
And those reconstruction streets are all asphalt streets. So essentially, asphalt streets that need reconstruction.
Generally speaking, yes. I think there were portions of Crescent in the last year or two when we reconned it that were concrete. Some was asphalt, and we actually rebuilt it in asphalt.
Okay.
And to answer your other question about Villa Avenue, that's a reimbursement to Villa Park, who's taken the lead on that road. That is heavily grant funded. So that is a separate capital project, if you will.
Correct. I'll just note in regards to this slide, even though it doesn't encompass this slide, before, what year is this? 2014, there were multiple years that were either budgeted with no dollars spent on concrete streets. Again, duly noted that there was no plan at that time. Or budgeted with no dollars spent. So either there was no budget for it, from my recollection, which I have somewhere in my stack of paperwork, or not budgeted at all. One thing I do want to correct, because of these circle backs, and I do actually have it in my spreadsheet, but because I printed it out in black and white and it was highlighted in red, I couldn't read it. One of the things that I noted, which I noted incorrectly, so I want to state that, was that for the concrete streets resurfacing, one of the years, the residential concrete street resurfacing for 2016 was already mentioned about Van Auken and Crestview, but the one that I wanted to talk about was, I believe it was 2020, where there were dollars spent. I think last time I said there wasn't dollars spent. It was just lessened. It was one of those years. Don't quote me on the year anymore. All the years are blending to me. But it was less spent than what was, I thought, initially proposed. So what I highlighted was either zero spent for that budget year or lower than budgeted. So my mistake on that one fiscal year.
Alderman Nardini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Probably getting into the weeds, but so that I understand, if a bunch of the concrete streets are surfaced with asphalt, what's the difference between reconstruction and resurfacing?
Are you asking if we start with a concrete residential street and our options are to reconstruct or mill and overlay? What the difference of those two are?
Say that again? I think that's what I'm asking.
If we start with a all concrete street, residential concrete street, are you asking what is the difference between a reconstruction and a grind and overlay?
No, what I'm asking is with an already concrete asphalt overlaid street, what's the difference between a reconstruction and a resurface? Would a reconstruction actually be removing the concrete underlay, repouring the concrete, and then reapplying the asphalt, or leaving it as a finished concrete surface?
We would probably remove everything down 16, 18 inches, so that the asphalt overlay, the concrete subbase, and then we remove some of the, most of these concrete streets have clay underneath, subcut some of that clay, and we would rebuild it with aggregate, and most likely we'd probably rebuild it with a fully asphalt section, probably 6 inches of pavement. That's what we did recently on Crescent over by Jefferson School. When we rebuilt it, we had a 14-inch cross-section, and again, some of it was old concrete roadway. So we excavated down 14 inches, put in 8 inches of new aggregate, and then a new 6-inch asphalt road in lifts. It sets us up better in the future, so when we grind and overlay that 6-inch section, there is still a vast majority of the mat, if you will, left, even after we grind some.
Understood.
Alderman Brennan.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Johnson, so you said in 2023 we did zero on the concrete street resurfacing. In the budget, I think we had allocated $305,000 in 2023. Did we use that budget for patching in 2023, even though we didn't have resurfacing dollars?
I believe we still did asphalt patching and concrete patching that year, even though we did not do a mainline resurfacing effort.
Understood. So I see 305 for concrete. I'm only talking concrete. So.
Alderman, did you pull that 305,000 from the KEB or from the operating budget in 2023? Probably my guess is the KEB.
Yes.
Yeah, and so what Director Coyle just told me was that was in the KEB, but it was not put into the operating budget, that 305 for that year.
Fair enough. So hopefully I don't make the same mistake. So appreciate that clarification. I'm looking at the KEB in 2024. And the concrete patching's at 355. Is that in the operating budget? The KEB is 30. I'm not fast enough to get back to the operating budget.
Yes, part of that is on page 2-50. 175,000, the rest is in the MUF budget.
Right, I saw that was split. Okay, thank you. So my last question. So Kent, in your opinion, based on the state of the concrete streets, is 355 sufficient to take care of anticipated patching that would be required?
Yes, I think we can work within that budget amount.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. I really just would like to thank the staff for pulling together this information. We've got 4 of the city's engineers here tonight, and I think the information that was presented shows us kind of the thoroughness of your review, all of the sources that you look to help guide your decisions and your recommendations to us and what goes into the budget. I really appreciate your professional expertise and appreciate all the information. Thank you.
Alderman Deuter. Alderman Irby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got hopefully 4 super fast questions. Number 1, cost per foot concrete, let's just say resurfacing, not rebuilding concrete. Say from a 2014 rough, and we're talking ballparks, 2014 today, just so when we do look at this analysis here, we know that in 2014 maybe it was 100 a foot, and maybe in today it's 300 a foot. So that's question number 1.
We have that. I just don't think we have that tonight, but we could get back to you on that.
Okay. Number 2, the little the van that cruises around and does the Google Earth rating of the pavement. You mentioned that you did a first pass and you got the data, and then you said something happened that make you decide we needed to go for a second pass, and I didn't quite comprehend or understand that. If you could just reiterate that again.
Sure. So we use Chastain and Associates again. They've done pavement management analysis for bigger towns like Schaumburg. They and others in the industry always recommend that this is active management. So they're gonna recommend you drive the streets every 3 to 5 years. So this was in their draft study. They were recommending 3 to 5 years. And so with 2024 coming up, we're about 5 years since we drove it last. Staff felt it would be beneficial to the city to have that second data point.
Okay, thank you. Number 3, water main overlay. So let's say we had one of the maps up, and that area is the 1960 water main pipe that's just causes 1/3 of all water main leaks. I'm just ballparking numbers. And therefore, if we went and repave that right today or tomorrow, how do you guys know when to do the water main and not have to come back and repave and do that? So that's the question.
That's an excellent question, and it is a very delicate and difficult task for us. But engineering, utilities, streets, I think every Department of Public Works discusses our long-term projects. So consistent funding for water and streets helps us plan better and make sure that we're not going to resurface the street and then the next year do the water main. So we do plan internally. We generally don't do water main, streets, sanitary all the same year. But we generally do our water main first, and then we come through and resurface. So there is a lot of planning that goes into that to make sure we don't, miss that opportunity, if you will.
Is that GIS based now?
It's turning to that. In the past, we had a lot of maps and Excel spreadsheets, and we are utilizing GIS quite a bit. And MGP right now gave us an example of other communities that they've done some of this analysis for, and they're starting to work on it for the city of Elmhurst.
And then final question, just to wrap it up. Appreciate the great answers. Alderman Cahill kind of mentioned that if we have an X pie of budgeting for the streets, regardless if it's asphalt or concrete, due to the rating system, it seems like the concrete was alleged that it will fall off the planning if we're always spending the money because asphalt comes up on a quicker or shorter timeline. So would there be a way we could carve out a niche for that? You understand the concept of we'll never get to concrete if we're always doing asphalt with a limited budget.
Yeah, I think by doing the suggested 540,000 annually, we are doing that. So we have a niche for residential concrete streets, and then we have a separate niche for all of our other asphalt streets. And again, you're right, asphalt lasts about 18 to 20 years. That's our goal. The concrete streets are proving to last 50 to 70 years. So there's a totally different life cycle with those two types of roadway.
Right. All right, thank you. That's it. Thank you, Mayor. I'm done.
Very good. Alderman Jensen.
Thank you, Mayor. So you said there's a 50 to 70-ish year useful life for concrete streets, right? And if they were laid in 1969, that puts the useful life range, if my math is right, to 2019 to 2039, call it. So if we go with the current plan, we're going to get through most or all the streets a little bit past 50% of the way of the useful life of the streets. Can you guys make sure that we do that so we don't reach the end of the life on a given street and have it be reconstructed completely? I mean, I know there's been projects delayed and things like that, but I think at the current schedule, we're kind of right in the middle of the curve of where, a non-engineer, outside observer would think we would be through the life of replacement of the streets or resurfacing of them. So we can make sure we have it in there next year.
Yeah, and that's the idea behind overlaying them. And when we put together that 2014 plan, as I recall, we talked about going east to west so that streets weren't necessarily run over with construction traffic after we had just repaved them. That's a plan. Plans change, and so what they do each year with the help of that, the pavement assessment, is to do exactly what you're suggesting, is look at the streets that need it the most so that we can pave those and so that they don't fall into a state of recon, as Kent would say.
The issue is that, it's hard to look at a budget and see no money spent on those streets for a couple of years, given, riding your bike on them, walking on them, uneven pavement. I know we patch it and it doesn't, you can have potholes develop. So, I'd like to see it in there in 2025 and stick to the plan if possible, because unfortunately up there is no other alternative but to walk and ride in the street. So, we're increasing risk of people falling, and it's dark and maybe hit a weird spot in the pavement that you normally would not asphalt. So, I know it's a concern of residents, so I'd like to see us stick to that plan if at all possible. And, if we have to deviate from that, which I understand it's a real world, things happen, can we get like a little bit more advance notice? Like, as soon as you guys know that might be a possibility, you let us know, particularly the aldermen of wards that have a lot of concrete streets. Thank you.
Alderman Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. I was about to put in a plug in for Ward 2, but thank you for mentioning that, Alderman Jensen. But I did see the attachment that you showed on page 149 that showed a little farther back. I know we had one of the pages in the circle back memo that also talked about both Ward 2 and Ward 3, but I think it only went back 5 years. I would love, just as a follow-up offline afterwards, I'd love to get a copy of that for Ward 2 as well.
We can definitely do that.
Thank you.
Alderman Bram.
Thank you. The first item I want to touch on is just doing a deeper dive in regards to the rationale of not having anything budgeted for these concrete street resurfacing for 23 and 24. What was noted in our circle back memo back to us, it states the 2023 and 2024 residential concrete resurfacing budget were deferred by the City Council to help balance, and I want to stress that, to help balance the general fund budget due to fiscal constraints, as staff opined that the deferment of the plan for 2 years would yield insignificant degradation of the concrete streets. I'd first ask, which hasn't been answered to date, what would be the degradation of the asphalt streets in that same 2-year time period? The reason why I asked that question was because even though the concrete streets were, I guess, opined upon that there is no budget needed for them and no dollars spent on them for those 2 years, the asphalt streets were increased by $650,000 for those 2 fiscal years. So we zero out concrete streets in the budget for those 2 years, but we increase. But the statement says we were doing it because of fiscal constraints. Well, how are we doing it for fiscal constraints if we're actually spending more in total between those 2 budget items instead of less? I don't understand on how that coordinates with the line of thinking if that was done for fiscal management. So if I can just understand that, that would help immensely.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. As the chart on page 143 shows, and Alderman Brand pointed out, 2020, we deferred that, not knowing what our situation was fiscally. In 2021, right?
Yeah, 21 started.
There was, we wanted to catch up on those asphalt streets that were starting to degrade, and so the dollar amount that you just put forth, the 600 and some thousand, was due to increasing costs. Post-COVID, we found all of our costs going up due to supply chain management and the ability to get materials, and so we increased those to catch up from the year and split over 2, and then also the rising costs.
If I may. So to me, that means that it was deemed for 3 fiscal years, it was no needed to do any catch-up on the concrete street resurfacing versus the 2. I mean, to me, it's very coincidental that in the budget, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone whatsoever, but in the budget, $540,000 was removed from one budget line item, but $650,000 was increased in another budget line item. But the statement is that we're doing it for to be fiscal conservatives. Well, that's not true. We increased the budget those 2 fiscal years, so we're not actually reducing the budget. We increased the budget. Whatever the reason is, I think that the statement is misleading at best because we increased the total budget. If I just look at those 2 line items, we increased the budget by taking from one bucket, the concrete street resurfacing, zeroing that out, and adding the $650,000 for those 2 years. This year, 2023 and 2024, from 3.3 million budgeted to 3.95, or $3,950,000 budgeted. So there's definitely an increase for 2 years, and if we move forward with the budget as proposed tonight, that means that concrete streets pretty much help, in my view, speculation or what have you, that concrete streets were zeroed out to help out the asphalt streets within the town, because it's pretty close, an increased budget on that line item, but not doing any work in the concrete streets. And I'm going to ask again, I have not heard, we have we have specific projects allocated for the streets that are in the worst shape in town. I already mentioned those. Kent already mentioned those, right? Villa, whatever, the other streets that we already talked about. So what are the other bad streets that we needed to increase the 2023 and 2024 budget to make sure they don't fall apart? It hasn't been answered. We have that budgeted separately. I get it, concrete streets are more durable. I get it that they last longer. You know, Kent just mentioned that concrete streets approximately, not holding them to it in a court of law, that's a joke, from 50 to 70 years. I've heard from 50 to 75 years, and asphalt streets from 18 to 20 years, and I've heard asphalt streets from 15 to 20. I understand all that, but to me, and I want to specify, I'm not only talking about Northeast, even though that's the area that I represent. I'm talking about the plan that was put in place by staff, approved by council. Again, it's by staff. Staff came up with the plan, not a single alderman. It was maybe by a request by an alderman or multiple, but staff came up with the plan back in 2014, and we're not coming close to adhering to that plan, in my view, by zeroing out 2 years in a row, and prior to that 2014 plan, multiple years in a row, any money spent on the concrete streets in the area. I was very hopeful and very excited when that plan was put in place in 2014. Yeah, I'm that old. I've been around that long. But to see for 2 consecutive years, I get it. 2025 must have. But I don't know why we're reallocating funds for one and zeroing out the other. It's definitely, in my opinion, not for the physical nature of it. That I don't understand, because, like I said, we increased the overall budget for those 2 line items. The last thing I'll say on that is that, you know, staff created the plan. We're the ones who make the decisions on if we adhere to the plan or not. I almost called you Alderman. City Manager Grabowski already made the statement, and I agree with, right? Plans change. But plans should be at least attempted to be adhered to, because that's why they're put in place. We should do our best to our ability. The funds are there. The funds are there to adhere to the plan. The request was by, I believe it was Alderman Brennan last meeting, about where can we get the funds. We can throw anything to see if it sticks, right? That's why my motion before was not anything specific. The funds are where they were reallocated from the get-go. The asphalt streets, that's where they were reallocated for the 2023 budget. So the funds are there. That shouldn't be even a question in my mind. I do, as Alderman Joyner said, I do appreciate the staff's time. I asked many questions over this process. I appreciate the presentation. Looking at a document for that report of, I don't know how much, 150 pages or whatever it is, the latest and greatest study, was not going to happen for a Monday night meeting, receiving it on Thursday for me. I did scan it as best to my ability, but I just feel strongly that in order to do right for my residents, I stand by my motion from last week that we should be reallocating $540,000 for the 2024 budget. That's it. Oh, just one more thing. Back in the 2014 study, the report from Mrs. McGrew actually states that the streets were classified as fair, and some were found to be poor, and others were in good condition. So in 2014, that's how they were viewed in 2014. Now, I don't know if that was used as the 2005 study or not, which I also have been carrying around with me, and that's why I'm getting good exercise. I also stated about that 2005 study before, and I made mention of, I don't know what the number was, 37. One of the streets was rated 37. That's not 100% accurate. One of the sections of the street was rated a 37 or whatever that number was. But I will say, because today I actually went through every single one, what the averages were. Obviously, 100 being a brand new street, North End was a 47. This is the whole street now. 52s, 46s, 43s. So 2005, that was what, 18, 19 years ago? They were rated from fair to poor. And we're still saying that we don't need to resurface for 2 straight fiscal budget years. So I hope that I have brought up some good data points to have my fellow aldermen agree with this motion. I don't see why we are ignoring what staff did back in 2014 with the plan. We're not even looking at the 2021 plan from my understanding. We're shelving it. I'm not sure on why that is. But this budget that's proposed of zeroing it out wasn't even based on that 2021 study. So what data points are we using? Because costs increase? Well, costs increase across the board. So we increased the budget of asphalt streets, not even utilizing the study that we did in 2021. And now we're doing another study in 2024, 3 years later. I'm just kind of confused on where we're going with this and why we're making the decisions that we're making.
All right. Let me, Alderman Nudera, then I'll defer to you.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple questions on asphalt streets. First of all, when new construction, new homes are built, they usually tie into some kind of water main in the middle of the street. So then they carve up the street and then they patch it. Who's responsible for that patching?
So the city performs the patching, but the builder pays for it as part of their building permit fee. There's a separate charge for street patching that allows the city to control the quality of the patching.
Okay, my next question is, when it comes to asphalt, we all know that when cracks occur in asphalt, with salt from cars over and over again, they tend to deteriorate, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So my question here is, with all the new construction that's going on in asphalt streets and streets being carved up on a regular basis, we're at risk of those streets deteriorating further. And so would that be in consideration of those asphalt streets to be looked at for resurfacing?
Yes, I think when we evaluate whether it's visual or we have a consultant like we did in 2019 and hopefully in 24, the rideability of the streets is factored in, the number of cracks. If we have a street that has 40 residential properties and 20 have been new homes over the last 10 or 20 years, that definitely degrades the score on the street itself, even if the patching is excellent.
Right. I just want to thank you for all your work. You guys have done a beautiful job and continue your great work.
All right. So, Mr. Johnson, what I see is we had a plan in 2014 to spend $300,000 to $450,000 a year for concrete. And when I'm looking at your chart, we did spend $300,000 in 2014. We spent the full amount, $450,000 in 2015. Then every year from 2015 through 2021, we spent $540,000. So we're essentially well above.
The actual spend was in the rows underneath.
Well, it's even.
So it varied from the
budgeted,
540.
I should say budgeted, and I was going on to say we spent actually more than
I'm
we
sorry.
budgeted for concrete streets. Am I reading that correctly? Except, I mean, it says what it says. Some years as much as $629,000 in 2018. So when we go to the average, we're pretty close at $423,000 a year, even spending zero in 2020 and 2023.
That's correct.
All right, when the analysis is done by staff, do you analyze each ward separately, or do you look at the streets of the city as a whole?
The latter.
All right. And if, in your professional opinion, have we treated the concrete roads better, the same as, or inferior to how we treat the asphalt streets in the city?
I would say the same.
All right. So, from my, and one other question. So there was a question about the surfacing and and then there was an inference to safety. Are there, whether we resurface or not, do we drive the streets and make sure if there are potholes or cracks, whatever, that those are repaired?
Yes, we do, and we also respond to complaints with people driving the streets looking for those potholes or trip hazards if we hear about specific locations.
So the fact that we don't resurface a particular road doesn't mean it's unsafe, because we will patch or repair as needed.
Correct.
All right. So from my perspective, we have a city staff that's gone out, and they've, for many years, and I don't think we have to go back to 2005 or 2014. History is important, but if we go back and look in recent history of what we're trying to do, we're on track, yet maybe a year or two or three behind to getting all of the concrete streets replaced as we planned in 2014. We prioritize the streets that need the repairs the most. And I feel like if there's any inequity, it's for people like me who have asphalt streets. I didn't get the high-quality streets that last 50 or 75 years. I got those crummy ones that last 18 or 20. So I see that as an inequity to the majority of the city. But we're not going to spend the money, I'm sure, to go back and give everyone concrete streets. What I see is we are, as a city, through all of the information that's probably taken about 100 hours of staff work, showing that we look at all of the streets, we see which ones need repairs the most, and we address those. As was stated last time, if we don't make the repairs on the asphalt streets, we can spend 3 or 4 times the amount to repair them than if we do them when the repair is needed. So I don't see anything that is presented here that tells us we should be deferring from the budget as planned. It's not, and I understand Alderman Jensen doesn't want it to be put off indefinitely, but it's really being picked up again 1 year later in 2025. We go back to the same amount of money that we've been spending. It's only prudent to spend the money that we need in the category of street repairs for those streets that need it the most. If you had a plan in your house to put on new siding because it's deficient and you find out you have a hole in the roof, you're going to switch over your budget from siding to the roof to make sure that you're taking care of a problem that if you don't address it is going to go significantly worse in the long run. So I don't, with all due respect, I don't see how any conclusion, I did read everything that was presented, I don't see how you can get any conclusion other than we have already allocated our street dollars for the proposed 2024 budget as they should best be allocated. That's my say. Anyone else? Alderman Toledo.
Thank you. I appreciate all the additional information. This is a topic that comes up every so often. Thank you to staff for all of the time and your expertise on this. The one comment, I agree with a lot of what the mayor said. The one comment that I'll make is that I think it's important for the residents of Elmhurst to understand the truth, and that truth is presented in all of this information. And I think it is unfortunate for people to walk away thinking that concrete streets are not maintained or maintained at a lower amount than other streets in Elmhurst. That is not a fair conclusion from the information presented. And I will support moving forward with the budget as written. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Alderman Bram.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I wouldn't consider on track being a 6-year postponement of the original plan. What's proposed, if we actually fulfill the budget, right, starting 2025 and every single budget year going forward, that instead of this plan that was proposed back in 2014 to be on track for 2026, it will be more like 2032, 2033. That's a fact. In regards to facts, I presented facts from data that was presented by city staff in reports that staff presented and council at the time signed off on and approved. That's the facts. I read verbatim about what it said about the concrete streets. I'm not making this stuff up. This is what reports that are for everyone in the public to look up and review. That's the facts. In regards to what should be spent where, how are we making those decisions? We're not following the report or the study that was done in 2021. We're not following the report or the study that was done in 2005. So to make the assumption or the speculation that we're actually following what is needed, we're not following the studies. It's been stated that we're doing another study in 2024 because we shelved, I believe that was the word used, the 2021 study. So how did we make this decision? If the study was done in 2021 and we're shelving it, not reviewing it, how was the decision made to zero out resurfacing for concrete streets and increase for asphalt streets? I don't see it. And the 3.9 that's allocated for asphalt streets and the 0 that's allocated for concrete streets, I personally, you don't have to, but I would personally add those other projects that are a complete rebuild of the streets. So that increases from 3.9 to whatever, 4.5, whatever the number is. I'm not even going to throw out the real number. So I don't know how we could say that, oh, well, we're happy that we're on track. We're not on track. Why are we kidding ourselves? 6 years to me is not on track. 6 years out of a 12-year plan, is not on track. A plan that was approved by staff, suggested by staff, and approved by council. That's not on track.
All right. Mr. Smith, what data does city staff use? Sorry, Mr. Johnson. Is it 10:30? Mr. Johnson, what data does the city use when it prepares our proposed budget for what's going to be spent in 2024? Does it use the 2021 data, the 2019 data?
So I would say we use all data that's available. The 21 draft study, which included 2019 actual data from driving the streets, gave us a snapshot, a rating of every single segment, every block of the city. City staff uses that. We use our own visual observations. We drive the streets, even if it's 20 blocks and we have the budget for 10 of them. We drive them over and over and over. And so we use the money on the worst streets. So I know that's not a direct answer, but I would say we use all the data. We use the prior studies that have been provided for in this PDF attachment. And we use our own experience as well. We have a lot of staff members here who have been doing this for a long time. And again, we're tasked every year with using the limited budget dollars to do the most good for the worst streets.
All right. From my perspective, I see it, what I heard staff say and what I think I've seen, we're not ignoring data. In fact, the 149 pages is the data upon which we rely, I hope we will rely, to make our best decision, which says in executive summary format, we're spending the street dollars where they are most needed, and we have a plan to take care of the streets going forward. Alderman Brennan.
Thank you, Mayor. So, appreciate the information. It's very clear to me. One of your early slides, percentage-wise, we have a lot of asphalt in town. So I'm not surprised that, given our winters, the reason to reevaluate things on an annualized basis makes a lot of sense. So given the volume of asphalt, I'm actually not surprised, at the situation that we're in. I appreciate the detail on the history from 2014 through 2023. And I do feel that staff is being very prudent in their decision-making based on treating the streets that need the dollars the most. So as a result, I definitely support what's been proposed in our budget. I wasn't convinced coming into tonight, but I appreciate the detail and I'm convinced now. Thank you.
All right, is there anything else on this circle back? Alderman Irby.
I think just for me to wrap this up for me personally, I'd like to have as much data as possible, right? And if we have $100 million, or let's just say we had $1 to spend on roads, and we're in an increasing economy where my dollar today is going to cost me $1.50 next year. But we don't know what that is next year. We don't know that $1.50 exactly what it is. It could be $1.20. It could be $1. So it's really hard to know, to me personally, do we have enough money budgeted without knowing how much am I getting for my dollar? That's that cost per foot. And so I'm hoping staff has got that figured out and has a nice crystal ball on these costs, because we could be easily coming back and saying, well, we need $1 million on concrete and we need $4 million on asphalt. I'm not saying that's what it will be, but with this rising market we're in, it could continue to rise. And this whole discussion and these numbers and what we budget could be off. We've seen it with water mains. We've seen it with other items, wastewater treatment plant, infrastructure, correct? So that's my biggest fear. It's not a question, just a comment for council. Thank you.
All right, Alderman Bastido.
So I appreciate that Alderman Bram, pushed and questioned on this and advocated for, his ward. He did bring up some good data points. And a week ago, when we were asking all these questions, I really wanted to see some money towards concrete streets in there as well. And so I appreciate that we pushed back on staff, and I wanted to see some options. Okay, well, where could we pay for concrete streets? Taking away money from somewhere else. And I appreciate that staff really pushed back and said, you know what, there is no recommendation we can give. I still didn't like it, but then, I read through all of the data, saw that there is, insignificant degradation, that they, when the 2014 plan came out, it was said things may have to change based on a number of factors. And of course, as we know, a lot of things change in the meantime. So I do appreciate that you guys have put so much time into this over the last week. I've met personally with staff, including Public Works. And, I support the budget as it is. I appreciate that Alderman Jensen confirmed that there is a commitment to funding concrete streets next year. And I appreciate that Alderman Bram asked tough questions, but I support the budget as it is. And thank you once again to staff.
All right, anything else? Alderman Jensen.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to thank Alderman Brand for bringing this topic up.
Alderman Jensen, pull the microphone, please.
I also want to thank Alderman Brand for bringing this up so we could really dive into it, which seems like we don't do all that often, and it's great we did on this topic. We all wish we had the funds to do the streets as quickly as possible. We know it's a tight budget. It's hard to fund everything we need to, including all the public works projects like the sanitary plant and all those things. One data point that stuck out to me in this is, I did this math on the fly, so correct me if I'm wrong, but inclusive of next year's budgeted data, we're spending a total of a little over $29 million since 2014 on resurfacing streets generally, of which 14.2% is going to concrete streets. I think there was a point, something in the voluminous data that said we have roughly 12% of our paved surfaces are concrete. So it seems like we're hitting the target on that in terms of redoing the concrete streets. We're going to unfortunately have it delayed by a couple of years, but we'll get to it within the useful life range of the concrete streets. So, I'm glad we went through this exercise and we learned a lot of stuff, but I support the budget as is. Thank you.
Anyone else? Alderman Bram? Go ahead.
I appreciate the staff's time on this. I mean, this is a topic ever since I've been elected. I've been bringing it forth. I appreciate the plan that was instituted in 2014. I wish we would be able to execute more closely to the plan, and I agree that plans change, but obviously the asphalt street resurfacing plan only increases, does not change. One thing that staff sent in regards to the circle backs was one statement. I'll not even read the whole sentence. Although deferring any of the asphalt streets on next year's proposed list 1 year would not cause them to become a reconstruction in 2025. So if we were to reallocate those dollars back to concrete streets, staff wrote in our circle backs, wouldn't cause an issue to the asphalt streets. So what are we fearful of? Why not reallocate it back? Staff's response, it wouldn't impact the streets going into 2025. Now it does say, not to neglect it, because I want to be up front, it does say staff does recommend to keep the budget where it is at 3.95 million for the asphalt streets. But the beginning of that sentence says it wouldn't impact a rebuild of any of the asphalt streets, which was the concern to some of the aldermen that I spoke with. The recommendation, though, from staff is to keep the budget as is and have $0 for concrete street resurfacing. But they also said in the same breath, no impact to asphalt streets.
All right, anyone else? All right, that completes the circle backs. We will have...
Point of order, are we going to take that off the table? It was tabled for this meeting, right? There was a motion in play. It was tabled for this meeting. So my understanding is that it would be removed from the table and we would vote on that
Graham,
motion.
it's not my job to make motions. If you have a motion to make,
I did not make that table. I didn't put it on the table. So can I
the person who
remove it?
makes the motion to table it does not have to be the person, I believe, that takes it off the table. It's been tabled. If somebody wants to take it off the table.
You're right. No, anybody can take it off the table. Anybody can take it off the table.
All right. I'm not sure how the verbiage goes on this, but I would like to remove the motion on concrete streets of adding the budget allocation of $540,000 to the 2024 budget off the table.
All right, there's a motion to take the previously tabled motion off the table, and the previous tabled motion was to add $540,000 to the concrete line for streets. Is there a second?
Just
Point of order?
point of order. Thank you, Mayor. Just a point of clarification. So we're removing the motion. If we were to vote in the affirmative, it would remove the motion from the table, and we'd be voting then on the motion, or be up for discussion.
Well, first, there's a motion to take the tabled motion off the table and put it before the council. And to get that before the council, there needs to be a second. If it's seconded, then the first vote would be, do we want to take it off the table? And then if it's passed from there, then we will be back to debating the main motion, which is to increase the budget. So right now, I have a motion to take the previously tabled motion off the table. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Alderman Jensen seconds it.
Point of order, do we vote on that removal off the table, or
Yes.
we do?
I
Okay.
think it's debatable.
We had to vote to table it.
I blew it last time, but...
We voted to table it, so it makes
did
sense
vote
we'd
to table it?
untable it, yeah.
Okay. There's that memory.
No, it's a...
Is a motion to table debatable?
We have to take it off the table. We put a new.
This is my guide here.
Pause on.
All right, so we have a motion. Right.
Alderman Jensen's on.
All right, I think, do you know if it's debatable? You think it's... All right, so for tonight, we're told it's not debatable. So we're not debating, the motion that we're going to vote on now before us is, shall we take the previously tabled motion off the table? All right.
Hill,
Aye.
Shanko,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
Cahill, absent, Toludo,
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Nudera,
Aye.
Bastido,
Aye.
Nardini,
Aye.
Brennan,
Aye.
Irby,
Aye.
Deuter,
Aye.
Bremus. 13 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent.
13 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent. The motion to remove from the table passes. The motion before us is to increase the concrete budget by $540,000. Discussion on the motion, and I'm going to, is there discussion on the motion?
No, I'm putting some pressure on here, James.
Is that, so the motion will
Saying it's zero. He wants to put it there.
Gotcha.
And what they're saying is
We're going back to the motion that we put on the table budget.
which was Graham and then second.
It doesn't have to have a motion. Yeah, all right.
All right, thank you.
All right. We're going to now vote on the main motion, which is to add $540,000. So an aye is to add the money, and a nay is not to add the money. Everyone clear? Clerk Tamer.
Hill,
Nay.
Schenko. No. Jensen,
No.
Graham,
Aye.
Cahill absent, Toledo,
Nay.
Park,
Nay.
Nudera,
Nay.
Bastido,
No.
Nardini,
No.
Brennan,
Nay.
Irby,
Nay.
Deuter,
No.
Verimus,
No.
12 noes, 12 ayes, 1 ayes, 1 absent.
12 noes, one aye, 12 noes, and 1 absent. So the motion is defeated. Anything else on circlebacks? All right, we will have the budget ordinance on the council agenda. It will be actually on the consent agenda for the next meeting. We have to act on it at the next meeting unless we want to have a special meeting because we need to have the budget passed before the end of the year. This is, and I know some of you are new to the process. It's been a very thorough process. I appreciate that everyone has fully participated and gone through an important part of the work we do for the city of Elmhurst. And I'm sure it'll be even more fun next year, so stay tuned. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, and then we will Alderman Toledo, do you have a motion? We'll have then we will resume with council at 7:30. Motion by Alderman Toledo. Is there a second? Alderman Deuter. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.